Hello CS112. Today I'll be going over a quick solution to Lab 3, which has to do with branching. I'll be doing today's solution in Python Visualizer just to show off how great of a tool it is. So it's nothing that you need to download. It's just a quick Google search. You would type in Python Visualizer like this, and you would click on the first pythontutor.com link. And this is just a simple web application. It's nothing, again, nothing you need to download. You can type up functions here, call them, and step through them. You will see how all your variables are updating in live time on the side, and it's just a great way to learn Python. I feel like this website saved my grade when I was in CS112, first learning Python. So enough of that. I am going to just paste right here the lab description. I've already typed it up so you guys don't have to sit through that. Essentially, you're going to be fed in several checking accounts from within the NBU, and you need to calculate the deduction fee based on which bank the ATM belongs to. Now, here are the four main conditions that we need to look out for when calculating what the deduction fee will be. First, if the transaction happens in a foreign country, 10%, there will be a 10% fee of the withdrawal amounts taken from your balance. Otherwise, if ATM not owned by NBU, there is a flat 10 USD fee. Next, if the ATM is owned by NBU, there are no fees. And lastly, if the final balance is negative, so there was an overdrawal, I have no idea what the actual term is, but if you overdrew the amounts, you are going to penalize them 50 USD. So now I did write these down in the literal order it said. They did give a numbered list like this, but then they actually had a small description. And it's very important to look at the wording here to pass all of these test cases. So in the paragraph, it literally said, a sentence like this, and then it has otherwise, if the ATM is not owned by NBU, there's a flat 10 USD fee. This implies that both of these cannot happen. So that means the structure of our control flow needs to change, right? We need to have specific checks to protect against both of these things happening at the same time. So let's just dive right into it. The very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to initialize some variables. Well, one variable to be exact. And since we are returning the balance after, I'm just going to create a balance after variable. And I'm going to set that equal to the bal before minus the withdrawal limits or amounts. Now, this is just setting up what we are going to be returning at the end, and I just went ahead and set it equal to the withdrawal as if it already happened. So now we're going to calculate the conditions, right? And I'm literally just going to go in the order that was described to us on the page because they actually were kind enough to give us a order that could work in theory. So the very first thing I'm going to check is if the transaction location is not in Utopia. So if I'm just going to copy and paste it because I don't like typing. Transaction lock does not equal Utopia. What are we going to do? Well, that is where we're going to make bal after, and we're going to take away that 10% of the withdrawal limit. So I'm going to say minus equals, I'm going to put everything in parentheses just because I like to be clear like that, withdrawal amounts times 0.1 to get that 10% of the withdrawal amount and deduct it as a fee to my balance. So a lot of people were confused by the syntax, so I would like to just re-clarify what this means in a comment here. So this minus equals, all it's saying is it's the exact same thing as bal after equals bal after minus that. So these two lines of code do the exact same thing. Now next, like I said before, there was this word otherwise here. Well, lastly, it wouldn't make sense regardless for both of these to happen at the same time, but this otherwise does imply that both of these things can't happen. So what keyword should I use here for this next condition? That is an elif. So that means if this does happen, this elif condition is not even going to be read. If this is false, then it will check if this condition is true, and if it is true, then it will enter it. So that is exactly what we want. And what is this elif? That is if the ATM type is not NBU, there's going to be a flat a flat 10 USD fee. So this is where we're just going to say bow after minus equals 10, and again, just to be clear, bow after equals bow after minus 10 is all this line of code is doing up here. So now we are going to get into that last condition, because we don't really need to have a condition for this, right? I mean, I could type out like, if the transaction location is Utopia and the ATM type is NBU, then do nothing, but there's no point in doing that. So we're just going to skip right to this guy to do our last check. If the final balance is negative. So if my bow after at this point is less than 0, I'm going to subtract 50 from that. Again, I can just do minus equals 50. It's the same thing as saying bow after equals bow after minus 50. And lastly, what do we want to do? We want to return the calculations we have done. So now I'm going to click Visualize Execution. As you can see, I have all of my test cases down here. I can run them all at once or one at a time, but I'm just going to click Visualize Execution, and you can skip to the ends just to see what your outputs are because I have printed them out. As you can see, I did get the expected outputs here. However, I want to show you real quick how this actually works. So it is important to know the control flow of Python. Here we go. To better understand the control flow of this. So as you can see, the very first thing Python will do is go to the first line of code. It's going to skip all of this, obviously, just because it's comments, but I wish this was a little shorter, because as you can see, as I click next, it's going to go to the first line of code. It's going to read this definition. Now, it's never going to enter this definition until it's actually called. So when I click next, it skips every line of code here, but then it sees, okay, now there's a function called a call for calculate balance. Well, I remember that there is a function called calculate balance back on line 10 or wherever it was. So it's going to go back up here, and now that it was called, it will enter this function. And as you can see, it will have the function call or the function name right here, as well as the parameters displayed for you nicely on the side here. And as it reads in these local variables, it will create them and add them to the little display here, which is nice and neat. And now it will check if transaction location does not equal Utopia. Well, we can even look right here. Is transaction location is Utopia. So it should not enter this. And we are correct, it did not enter that. Well, does ATM type not equal NBU? Well, ATM type is NBU, so it should not enter that. And is the balance after less than 50? Well, our balance after is 900, thus returning bow after, and the return value is 900, thus printing that to the screen. Let's go to a more interesting one. Let's go to maybe, okay. Why not this one? Okay, so now we're looking at this next one here. Let's just look at the function call here. The withdrawal amount is 200, the balance before is 1,000. And once we step through it, well, now does the transaction location not equal Utopia? Well, it doesn't equal Utopia. Our transaction location is Bangladesh. I can click next. Now we can see our bow after minus equal 10% of the withdrawal amounts. We can see our bow after update immediately, and so on and so forth. You see how after this line of code executed, it didn't even read this elif statement, because that's how the control flow works. This is else if. That means if this first if statement is true, the second else if, it won't even be read because this is true, because this will only be read if the first if is false. But I strongly recommend doing this even for projects. A lot of you guys are posting on Piazza asking us to debug your code for you, which we cannot do. But I strongly suggest doing this. So for instance, if you're failing a test case, it will tell you what the test case is specifically. So you can literally copy and paste it here with your code into Python Visualizer, step through your code and see why it is entering or not entering a specific branch you're expecting it to with the passed in inputs.